Hello students, welcome to our study of literary criticism. As we enter this new branch of study, it's only right that we ask ourselves the question, what is literary criticism? Well, literary criticism is nothing but the study and evaluation of literary works based on our power of reasoning and judgment. In other words, it is a kind of analysis of literary works which is critical in nature. That is, the kind of reading which asks questions and makes evaluations and judgments. Well, to understand better the practice of literary criticism, I think we can just look at the difference between critical thinking and non-critical thinking. Non-critical thinking is a plain, simplistic view of the world. When you do non-critical thinking, you are not asking any questions. You're just seeing things as they are, as they appear to you, and accepting them as they appear to you. You do not trouble yourself with any question. You do not try to find any connections, any hidden meanings, and you just look and accept things as they present themselves to you. On the other hand, when you do critical thinking, you are, full of questions. You keep asking, all the W questions, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and also the how. You do not accept things as they are, but keep pondering deeper, keep arguing and looking for answers to your questions and looking for connections and hidden meanings and so on. So that's the difference between non-critical thinking and critical thinking. And when you do, when we take up literary criticism, we realize that we are now reading literary works with a lot of questions in order to arrive at informed decisions and judgments and evaluations about those literary works. Now, it's nothing new. Literary criticism is probably as old as literature itself. From the time of the earliest literary works, there would have been some form of literary criticism. And, it's important to know that the word criticism actually comes from the Greek word krine, which means to judge. And the term kritikos actually means a judge of literature. So literary criticism is the practice of reading, judging, evaluating, and then commenting on the literary work and its characteristics, its qualities, and so on. And as we do this practice, of literary criticism, as we engage in literary criticism, we may use theory, one theory or the other, some kind of theory to support our arguments, to support our judgment, to support the evaluation we make. So that is known as literary theory. So literary criticism, the practice, and literary theory, the principles that inform and help this practice of literary criticism. So, the purpose of literary criticism, the reason why literary criticism is done may be many-sided. Somebody may have a very moralistic reason to do literary criticism. Someone else may, on the other hand, wish to make uh, a literary study, a study of the literary forms used, the language, the style, also, a very formalistic kind of literary criticism. Someone else may prefer to probe deep into the minds of the characters in the literary work and make an assessment based on that, make a psychological kind of criticism. Some others may tend to look at the author, the life of the author, what it reflects and how it is reflected in the work, and thereby make a very biographical study of the literary work. On the other hand, someone else may prefer to read the literary work against the background, the historical background against which it was written, make a historical or even a socio-political reading of the work. A certain reader may look at the way in which the gender relations are represented in the work and thereby make a gender reading or a feminist reading, a queer reading. Someone else may prefer to look at the racial relations and make thereby a critical race theory reading, and so on. The purposes, the impulses behind the reading may be various. So, to understand the long history of literary criticism, the many-sidedness of literary criticism, the multifacetedness of literary criticism, one can just take the example of a text that most of us are familiar with and see how varied uh, approaches to that text can be. Let's take a look at the play The Tempest, written by William Shakespeare, his last play. And for that very reason, this play is often considered to be a biographical play, in the sense that the protagonist, Prospero, here is often seen as a representation of Shakespeare himself. And in the way that Prospero bids goodbye to his art of magic in the play, many readers and critics have seen a parallel to the way in which Shakespeare bid goodbye to the stage with the writing of this play. And they see many connections between the play, the characters, and the situation, and Shakespeare's own life. So there's plenty that you can derive about the play when you make that kind of a biographical reading. But another reader may just not be interested in making that kind of a biographical reading. That reader may, on the other hand, be more interested in looking at the language of the play, the images used, the stylistic devices used, the poetry, and so on, and thereby making a pure of stylistic or formalistic reading of the play. You're just not concerned about the author's life as reflected in the life of the characters here. You're not bothered about anything else. You're only looking at the form and the style and the language and the images of the play. A third reader might just not be satisfied with that kind of reading. He or she may want to make a political reading of the play, and there's plenty here, where you can critique the play for the way in which it represents race, for example. Many other readers who have seen this as a play that epitomizes, the whole establishment of colonization. One can look at Prospero as a colonizer who invades this island and enslaves the people of the island, enslaves the owner, the real owner of the island, in exactly the same manner that Great Britain had, established colonies all over the world and really enslaved deprived the people of those colonies of their autonomy and their power and so on. So that would be a race or a political, maybe you could call it a post-colonial reading of the play. Another reader may be more interested in the way in which gender relations are represented here. They may focus on the character of Miranda, for example, and look at the way in which she is uh, presented. How is how, in what way does she have any autonomy? Does she have a voice? And so on. You're making a feminist reading of the play. So, it is endless, the kind of readings that you can um, subject the text to. This text or any text for that matter would be endless. So, literary criticism thereby we realize is as old as literature itself and something that is, even now renewed and constantly evolving. It has not reached a full stop. As time passes, as new experiences emerge, as new developments emerge, new ways of looking at text also emerge. And it's very, very important to make this kind of a reading of literary works to understand the ways in which literary works reflect the times and tell us so much more about ourselves, about our world, about the world that we live in, about the things that shape our thinking, and so on. Literary works really do reflect our world in ways that we cannot even imagine. And therefore, it's very important to subject literary texts to deep critical analyses, to make informed readings of literary texts, keep asking questions, and derive hidden meanings from literary texts. The same holds good for any kind of creative text. It could be a painting, it could be a piece of sculpture, it could be street art, anything and everything can be subjected to this kind of informed reading. So that is where the importance of literary criticism lies. So in this paper, I'll be dealing with the fourth module and taking you through the developments in the field of literary criticism, the major developments in the field of literary criticism in the 20th century. In the other modules, which will be handled by the other teachers, you'll be looking at the earlier ages, literary criticism in the past, classical literary criticism, and then literary criticism during the Renaissance and during the era of Enlightenment and so on. We will be focusing on some of the key literary um, thinkers, literary critics of the 20th century. And that would include critics like T.S. Eliot, I.A. Richards, F.R. Lewis, the new critics like Clint Brooks, then some of the formalists like Shklovsky, archetypal critics like Northrop Frye, and so on. So some of the major literary critical critics of the 20th century. That will be our concern in this section.